Charlie Chaplin. For the world, Charlie Chaplin was the eternal little tramp, a figure of laughter, heartbreak, and silent genius. But his final curtain call was anything but peaceful. After dying peacefully on Christmas Day in 1977 in Switzerland, Chaplin was buried in a quiet cemetery in Coursier-sur-Vevey. The peace lasted only 3 months. On a foggy March morning in 1978, cemetery workers found Chaplin's grave empty. His entire coffin had been stolen. No grave disturbance, no clue, just gone. As if the world's most beloved clown had vanished in a final joke from beyond. The truth was darker. Two struggling immigrants had stolen his body and demanded a $600,000 ransom from his widow, Una O'Neill. They sent photographic proof. They threatened desecration. Una, dignified and unshaken, refused to pay. Instead, she teamed with Swiss police to track the criminals. The chase spanned weeks and involved the surveillance of over 200 public phone booths. Eventually, the men were caught. Chaplin's body was found buried in a cornfield, 10 miles from where he once lay in peace. On May 17, 1978, he was returned to his original resting place, but now buried under reinforced concrete to prevent future theft. What makes this so strange is that the thief later claimed it was never about money. He believed Chaplin's family was rich enough that the ransom was reasonable. The court didn't agree. Chaplin's grave is now serene once more. But beneath the grass lies not just a comedy legend, but also concrete, scandal, and the lingering echo of the strangest posthumous kidnapping in Hollywood history. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was an international icon who defied borders, gender norms, and fascist regimes. But even in death, her legacy remained tangled in contradiction. Born in Berlin, she became an American citizen, served the Allied cause during World War II, and openly denounced Nazi Germany. She once said, "I will never return to Germany." But in 1992, after her death in Paris, her daughter had her body flown to Berlin. She was buried in a small, relatively obscure cemetery, Städtischer Friedhof 3 in Schöneberg, not a grand resting place fit for a legend. Why? Because 3 generations of her family rested there. But also, authorities feared neo-Nazis would deface a more public memorial. And yet, Dietrich still has 2 graves. In Paris, where she spent her final years, fans built an unofficial shrine at her apartment. Visitors leave flowers and notes under a plaque that reads, "Marlene lived here." In Berlin, her grave bears a modest German inscription, "Hier stehe ich an den Marken meiner Tage." Here I stand on the markers of my days. 2 nations, 2 identities, 2 tombs, 1 body. Marlene's final resting place is a divided one, just like the life she lived. In death, she became a woman belonging to everywhere and nowhere at once. John Barrymore. John Barrymore, the great profile, lived a life of theatrical excess, so it's almost poetic that even death couldn't stop his final performance. After he died of liver failure in 1942, the plan was simple: return him to Philadelphia to rest in the Barrymore family plot. But Hollywood had other plans. According to long-standing rumors, some say fact, his closest friends, including director Raoul Walsh and actor Errol Flynn, bribed a morgue attendant, stole Barrymore's embalmed body, and propped it in a chair for one last drunken poker game at Flynn's home. The details vary depending on who you ask, but even Barrymore's son acknowledged the tale might be true. The idea of his father being borrowed for one final toast seemed oddly fitting. His burial remained strange long after. Though initially laid to rest in Philadelphia, his body was moved decades later by his son to a different cemetery, Mount Vernon. The new site features an elaborate marker. While whispers persist that Barrymore's original casket was empty, the remains secretly cremated. Fact or folklore? No one's certain. But Barrymore's grave stands today like a stage curtain, closed, polished, and theatrical, concealing what may be the wildest posthumous Hollywood tale ever whispered. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi will forever be remembered for one thing: Dracula. But while the role brought him fame, it also chained him to a single identity, one that followed him even into the grave. When Lugosi died in 1956, his career had long declined. He was broke, addicted to morphine, and largely forgotten by Hollywood. Yet his family made a powerful statement: He would be buried in his Dracula cape. Whether it was his wish or theirs, no one agrees. But the symbolism was undeniable. Even stranger is the loss to film history. The cape was likely an original from Universal's 1931 production, a priceless artifact entombed forever. His burial at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City was modest. Few Hollywood elite attended, but hundreds of ordinary fans did, some dressed as vampires, a surreal procession for the man who embodied the undead. In life, Lugosi struggled to escape Dracula's shadow. In death, he became it. His grave is now a pilgrimage site for horror fans who whisper tributes into the California wind. Beneath that black granite marker lies not just Bela Lugosi, but a costume, a curse, and a legacy sealed in velvet. Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield's death was as sensational as her life. When the 34-year-old bombshell perished in a gruesome 1967 car crash, the world mourned, and tabloids had a field day. Urban legends falsely claimed she was decapitated. Conspiracies swirled. But what truly made her posthumous journey strange was not the rumors. It was the grave. Mansfield was buried in Penargyle, Pennsylvania, the modest hometown she had once left behind. Rather than the Hollywood cemeteries where other stars rested, she was laid to rest near her childhood church and family. Her mother made sure her headstone was like nothing else, a massive pink, heart-shaped monument that reads, "We live to love you more each day." Visitors say it radiates with kitsch and tragedy, but the strange didn't stop at aesthetics. Fans began reporting odd experiences at her grave, the smell of her perfume lingering in winter air, whispers, flickers of a blonde figure. Paranormal investigators began including her burial site on ghost tours. Strangest of all is that many fans still believe the grave doesn't contain her real body. A theory persists, despite family denial, that she was secretly buried in Hollywood with only a symbolic monument in Pennsylvania. That rumor persists to this day, kept alive by believers who leave lipstick-stained kisses on the pink stone. Meanwhile, her fatal crash site in Louisiana has become a second shrine, with admirers leaving flowers on the roadside. One death, two memorials, one heart-shaped mystery. Jane Mansfield, even in death, refused to fade quietly. Her grave became a pop culture pilgrimage, a splash of pink in a sea of gray, echoing her life as a sex symbol who dared to be larger than life and death. Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen wasn't the kind of star who played by anyone's rules, and he certainly didn't start in death. The King of Cool, as he was famously known, died in 1980 from mesothelioma. While Hollywood executives offered him grand burial arrangements in elite cemeteries, McQueen had other plans, ones that reflected his need for speed, solitude, and sky. The actor's body was cremated immediately after his passing, but instead of resting beneath marble or beside other screen legends, his ashes took flight. Literally, in a final tribute arranged by his close friend and flying instructor Sammy Mason, McQueen's ashes were loaded into a vintage World War II Stearman biplane. As the aircraft soared over the Pacific Ocean near Santa Paula, California, his ashes were released into the wind. No headstone, no traditional grave, just air, sky, and water, the very elements McQueen adored in life. This burial choice wasn't just poetic, it was defiant. He had refused the posthumous branding of becoming a celebrity monument. He didn't want to be a tourist stop like Marilyn Monroe or James Dean. He wanted to vanish into freedom. Over time, fans created an unofficial shrine near his old aircraft hangar. Others have chartered planes to retrace the flight route and toss roses into the sea. In 2012, a small memorial stone was finally erected near the hangar, bearing a quiet inscription, "Steve McQueen, 1930 to 1980, the spirit lives on." Perhaps what makes McQueen's resting place so strange is that it's not a place at all. It's a direction, a horizon, a concept. He rests not in earth, but in the sky he never stopped chasing. Proof that even in death, Steve McQueen remained untouchable. Jean Harlo. Jean Harlo, the original blonde bombshell, burned brightly and briefly. When she died suddenly of kidney failure at just 26 in 1937, Hollywood was stunned. But the strangeness came not from her death, but from where she ended up. Her mother, known as Mama Jean, was devastated. Refusing to bury her daughter like a common star, she bought a private sealed marble room in the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. This wasn't just a crypt, it was a fortress. Inside, Harlo was placed in a triple-sealed bronze casket, surrounded by an elaborate marble sarcophagus. No one, not even family, was permitted entry after the initial entombment, except a single florist hired to refresh flowers, paid from a special trust Mama Jean established. The room became a locked vault of grief, invisible to the world. What makes this burial so strange is how intentionally inaccessible it is. Fans can't visit her. Film historians can't document the chamber. Mama Jean wanted Harlo locked away from the public that once adored her. Even the name on the crypt avoids Hollywood flash. It reads Harlean Carpenter, her birth name, followed by the words, "Our baby." It's said she was buried in a blue satin gown, clutching a note from her lover, William Powell, but no one can confirm it. Her mother died in 1958 and was buried beside her. But later, a stepfather had her remains moved, leaving Harlo alone once again. Today, Jean Harlo remains entombed behind a wall in a room no one enters, wearing her stardom like a secret. Her eternal silence mirrors the tragedy of her short life. Glamorous, isolated, and forever behind glass. Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino, Hollywood's first great Latin lover, died at just 31 in 1926. The city went into hysteria. Over 100,000 people mobbed his New York funeral. But when his body arrived in Los Angeles, there was a major problem. He had nowhere to be buried. Enter June Matisse, the screenwriter who had discovered him. She offered her family's crypt at Hollywood Forever Cemetery as a temporary resting place until something grander could be arranged. But here's where it gets strange. That temporary arrangement became permanent. Matisse died suddenly the next year. Her family reclaimed her original crypt. Valentino's body was quietly moved into the adjacent crypt, the one meant for Matisse's husband. Essentially, Hollywood's most romantic icon ended up in a borrowed grave meant for someone else. And then came The Woman in Black. Starting in 1927, on the anniversary of Valentino's death, a veiled woman began visiting his grave, leaving a single red rose. The tradition continued for decades. Some say it was multiple women over the years. Others claim it was publicity. But it made Valentino's grave a pilgrimage site and added ghostly glamour to his eternal legend. Despite fan donations and several attempts to build a proper tomb, mismanagement and scandal meant he was never reburied. Instead, he lies in a modest crypt, unadorned and unintended. Each year on August 23rd, fans still gather in his honor, making it the longest-running Hollywood memorial tradition. His final resting place remains a borrowed space that was never supposed to be his, but somehow became the perfect symbol of a man whose screen life was filled with passion, beauty, and fleeting permanence. Jimmy Durante, radio star, vaudeville legend, and the unmistakable voice behind "Good Night, Mrs. Calabash, Wherever You Are," carried one of old Hollywood's most sentimental mysteries to the grave, and his final resting place only deepens it. Durante's beloved first wife, Jean, died in 1943. Heartbroken, Jimmy bought adjacent burial plots at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, promising they'd be reunited one day. He visited often, sometimes alone, and other times with flowers. But then came an emotional twist. 16 years after Jean's death, Durante remarried. His second wife, Margie Little, stayed with him until he died in 1980. So where should he be buried? With his first love or his last? In a decision that stunned many, Jimmy kept his original plan. He was buried beside Jean. Margie, though heartbroken, honored his wish. She would be buried elsewhere. What makes this so strange is the headstone itself. It bears both Jimmy's and Jean's names. No mention of his career, no mention of Margie, just a simple epitaph, the one and only. But the mystery doesn't stop there. Durante famously closed every show with "Good Night, Mrs. Calabash, Wherever You Are," but refused to explain who she was. After his death, friends confirmed it was a secret tribute to Jean, nicknamed Mrs. Calabash, after a stop they once shared in Calabasas, California. Adding a final layer of Hollywood legend, rumors swirled that Durante's famous nose, his schnozola, was so iconic he once joked it should be preserved separately. While that never happened, cemetery staff still get questions about the nose. Today, visitors find a modest, sentimental grave, simple, dignified, and full of hidden meaning. Jimmy Durante didn't want a monument. He wanted a memory. And his grave, like his catchphrase, still leaves us wondering, who are we truly saying goodnight to? Mae West. Mae West was all curves, confidence, and controversy. She oozed sensuality and command in every line she ever delivered. But her final resting place? It's as buttoned up and quiet as you could possibly imagine. A mausoleum she never once visited. In the 1930s, at the peak of her fame, Mae purchased a family crypt in the Cypress Hills Abbey in Brooklyn, New York. That alone might not seem strange, until you realize she never lived in New York again. She moved permanently to Hollywood and never once returned to see her chosen burial site. Why buy a crypt she never visited in a city she had left behind? Some say nostalgia, others say control. West, ever the master of her image, may have wanted a resting place that was hers alone, untouched by Hollywood's glitz or press intrusion. After her death in 1980, her body was flown 2,800 miles from Los Angeles to Brooklyn. Inside the austere, traditional mausoleum, worlds away from her sequined image, lies a simple bronze plaque. Mae West, 1893 to 1980. No epitaph, no glamour, just brass and stone. It's a stark contrast to the bawdy persona that once said, "When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better." Even her funeral was reserved. Closed casket, few frills. For a woman who once draped herself in diamonds and purred innuendo, the silence of Cypress Hills Abbey feels almost eerie. Her personal collection, gowns, scripts, jewelry, wasn't displayed in a museum. It was kept hidden for years in storage, as if her public self was buried long before her body. Mae West rests in a crypt she never saw, in a city she never revisited. For a woman who broke every rule, maybe this final contradiction was her way of keeping one last secret. Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre, one of Hollywood's most recognizable character actors, left behind a trail of unforgettable roles, from the sinister child killer in M to the nervous sidekick in The Maltese Falcon. But in death, he quietly slipped into anonymity thanks to one bizarre oversight. His grave bore the wrong name. When Lorre died in 1964, he was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, not far from his peers. The resting place should have been a final homage to his legacy. Instead, the grave remained unmarked for years. Then when a marker was finally added, it read, Peter Lorre. Yes, Lorre. How does that happen? Friends speculated miscommunication, or possibly the result of rushed arrangements. Either way, the typo stood for nearly a decade. Even more curious, few fans even noticed. Eventually, admirers raised funds for a proper gravestone bearing his correct name, correcting the error. But the embarrassment stuck. One of film's most unforgettable faces was nearly lost to a simple misspelling. Lorre's strange burial doesn't end there. Some fans still believe his role in horror films caused cemetery staff to treat his grave differently, avoiding fanfare. For years, visitors said his grave felt hidden or avoided. Whether intentional or accidental, it felt like Hollywood wanted to forget him. But Lorre fans didn't. They still gather annually at his grave, correctly marked now, to honor the strange, twitchy, brilliant actor whose voice and face haunted generations. In a town obsessed with branding, Peter Lorre's grave became a symbol of something rare, a star remembered not by name, but by unforgettable presence, even if they got the spelling wrong. Errol Flynn, buried among strangers, not stars. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's swashbuckling rogue, lived with flair and died with secrets. But the most surprising one, his final resting place. For a man who lit up screens in pirate hats and tights, Flynn wasn't buried among stars. He was buried among strangers. When he died in 1959 of a heart attack, plans were floated to inter him at Forest Lawn or Hollywood Forever. But for reasons still debated, Flynn was laid to rest at Forest Lawn, Glendale, in a far, unassuming section, not the celebrity-filled hills. His grave is nearly impossible to find without directions. There's no flashy mausoleum, no statue, no tribute to Captain Blood or Robin Hood. Just a simple bronze plaque with his name and dates. No epitaph, no quote, no grandeur. What's stranger is what lay nearby. Ordinary citizens, gardeners, teachers, people who may have never known they were buried next to one of the most iconic movie stars of all time. Some claim the low-key burial was at his request. Flynn had grown tired of Hollywood's hypocrisy. Others believe it was financial. His estate was in tatters at the time of his death. A once rich star, buried quietly like a man forgotten. Flynn's resting place has since become a challenge for fans, a kind of Easter egg hunt for classic cinema devotees. Those who do find it leave pirate hats, swords, and bottles of rum, tributes to a legend who once lived large and died quietly. And maybe that's fitting. After all, Flynn spent his life surrounded by crowds. In death, perhaps he finally found peace among the unknown. Gloria Swanson. Gloria Swanson, the imperious silent film goddess who roared back into fame with Sunset Boulevard, spent her final years wrapped in nostalgia and luxury. She had become the face of faded stardom, declaring, "I am big. It's the pictures that got small." But when death came in 1983, her final act was strangely quiet, almost eerily so. Rather than choosing Hollywood Forever or Forest Lawn like many of her contemporaries, Swanson was buried at the Episcopal Church of the Heavenly Rest in New York City. Not in a famous cemetery, not near other stars, but in a church crypt few ever visit, even fewer recognize. What makes this so strange is that Swanson was known for grandeur. In life, she demanded attention, wore peacock feathers, and held court at every occasion. In death, she chose stillness, humility, seclusion. There is no grand marker, no dramatic epitaph quoting Norma Desmond, just a modest marble plaque inside the church, barely noted by tourists or even most locals. It's as if the woman who once draped herself in jewels and demanded her close-up wanted her ending to be entirely opposite, modest and unseen. Swanson's resting place is so discreet, fans have occasionally mistaken it for a storage chamber. Only a few true devotees make the pilgrimage, often leaving vintage film reels or 8x10 glossies as tribute. It's one of the most extreme reversals in Hollywood afterlife lore. Swanson, the Empress of Attention, lies in a crypt so hidden that you must know exactly where to look. Maybe it's fitting. After all, she was always acting, even in death, giving us one final scene with no spotlight at all. Frederick March. Frederick March won 2 Academy Awards, starred in classics like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and reigned as one of Hollywood's most versatile leading men. But his grave doesn't tell you that. In fact, it doesn't tell you anything at all. When March died in 1975, he was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. Yes, the same cemetery that hosts the likes of Walt Disney, Clark Gable, and Carole Lombard. But here's the twist. March's grave is located in the Garden of Memory, and there is no headstone. Nothing. His burial plot is unmarked. Visitors pass by daily with no idea that an Oscar-winning actor lies underfoot. There's no tribute, no inscription, no clue, just carefully manicured lawn. Why? Some say it was his wife's wish. Others believe March himself requested anonymity. After a long, illustrious career, perhaps he didn't want to be immortalized in stone. Perhaps he simply wanted rest. But it's strange. Hollywood thrives on names carved in marble and faces etched in bronze. March's absence is so stark it feels defiant. Today, a few film buffs who've tracked the exact coordinates of his plot leave flowers directly on the grass. No plaque, just blossoms. It's a whisper of remembrance in a place that otherwise forgets. And that's what makes March's grave one of the strangest. Because it isn't there. A void where a legacy should be. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton, the stone-faced genius of silent cinema, the man who ran from falling houses and survived every cinematic disaster with a deadpan stare, chose a final resting place that few would expect. When he died in 1966, he was laid to rest not in Los Angeles, not even in a high-profile cemetery, but at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, in a nearly anonymous location. The oddity isn't that he's at Forest Lawn. That's fairly typical. It's where he is within it that baffles fans. Keaton's grave is in a small, largely overlooked plot far from the main memorials. It's shockingly understated. A small plaque flush with the grass, bearing only his name and dates. No mention of film, of comedy, or of his unmatched contribution to cinema. The man who made audiences roar in laughter with impossible stunts now rests beneath a stone that tells no stories. And stranger still, Keaton wasn't religious. Yet he was buried in a section often reserved for Catholic families, reportedly because it was the most affordable space left at the time. The decision wasn't symbolic, it was circumstantial. Visitors who stumble upon it are often surprised that this is where Buster Keaton ended up. Many expect a statue, a mural, a bronze figure leaping through a window. But no, it's just grass and stillness. It's as if the man who never spoke a word in his early films allowed his grave to be his last punchline. Quiet, hidden, and perfectly still. Marie Dressler. Marie Dressler, once one of MGM's most bankable stars, won an Academy Award and reigned as the comic matriarch of the early 1930s. She was beloved, eccentric, and a beacon of character acting in a town obsessed with beauty. But after her death in 1934, she almost disappeared. Literally. Dressler was buried in a small cemetery in her hometown of Cobourg, Ontario, Canada. And for decades, her grave went unmarked. The reason? Confusion and neglect. Though MGM paid for her funeral, no one followed up to ensure a marker was placed. Her name was missing from cemetery records for years. Visitors walked right past the plot, unaware that one of early sound cinema's most cherished icons lay there. Local historians eventually pieced the story together. In the 1960s, her fans, shocked that her grave was unmarked, raised funds to finally give her a proper stone. Today, her headstone bears her name and dates. But the grave's remote location and decades-long anonymity make it one of Hollywood's strangest burial stories. Dressler once said, "You're only as good as your last picture." But in death, she proved that fame, even Oscar-winning fame, can fade. Her vanishing grave became a symbol not of celebrity, but of how easily time forgets. Lon Chaney Sr. Lon Chaney, the legendary man of a thousand faces, terrified and awed silent film audiences with his grotesque transformations in The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera. Yet for a man who left such a striking mark on cinema, his final resting place remains cloaked in mystery. When Chaney died of throat cancer in 1930, his funeral was private and his burial even more so. According to public records, he was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. But here's the strange part. There is no marked grave, no tombstone, no visible sign of where the horror icon lies. Fans searching for his grave are met with confusion. Maps provide no answers. Cemetery staff politely decline to reveal the location, citing a family request. It's as if the man who mastered the art of hiding behind masks chose to carry that anonymity into death. Over the years, rumors have flourished. Some believe Chaney was buried under a false name. Others think he was cremated and scattered in secret. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but one thing is clear. No official marker exists. This deliberate vanishing act feels fitting for a man whose life was spent in transformation. In death, Lon Chaney became his greatest role. Completely invisible, yet always present. A phantom forever haunting Hollywood without a single stone to name him. Thomas Mitchell. Thomas Mitchell won an Oscar, played Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life, and starred in Gone with the Wind. But in death, it wasn't his credits that made headlines. It was the strange orientation of his grave. Buried at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, Mitchell's headstone appears normal at first glance. But take a closer look, and you'll see it's facing the wrong direction. Unlike the surrounding graves, which face east in traditional Christian burial alignment, Mitchell's is positioned westward. Why? No one really knows. Some suggest it was a surveying error. Others claim it was a personal request. a final act of defiance from an actor who famously played charming, stubborn characters. A few historians even believe it was symbolic, Mitchell wanting to face Hollywood, physically turning his back on death. What's even stranger is that his headstone, though elegant, contains no mention of his career, no hint of the roles that made him beloved. Visitors often pass by without realizing they're standing above one of Hollywood's greatest character actors, unless they notice the grave that's turning away. Thomas Mitchell's final resting place remains one of quiet rebellion, a subtle nod to a life lived on his own terms, even if the afterlife required a strange turn. Thelma Todd. Thelma Todd was known for her wit, her beauty, and her tragic, still unsolved death at just 29. Found dead in her car from carbon monoxide poisoning in 1935, the actress's demise has inspired decades of speculation. Murder or accident? But what's equally strange is where she ended up. Todd's ashes are housed in a private vault at Forest Lawn, Glendale. But unlike other celebrity memorials, hers is hidden behind a locked, windowless door within the Great Mausoleum. The public can't visit. There's no open space, no engraved marble, just a locked panel behind which her urn rests, shrouded in silence. Fans have long expressed frustration that they can't access the site. Even in death, Todd remains behind closed doors, both metaphorically and literally. Adding to the mystery, her urn reportedly bears no name, only a reference number on cemetery maps. Some say her family chose secrecy to avoid gawkers or tabloid seekers. Others think it's simply a reflection of the shadows surrounding her death, a woman with a golden screen smile buried behind a veil of questions. Today, Thelma Todd's legacy lives on in noir documentaries and old comedies, but her final resting place remains hidden, secretive, as elusive as the truth about her final night. Clifton Webb. Clifton Webb, the urbane star of Laura and the Razor's Edge, lived with fastidious style, and he brought that same obsessive precision to his own burial. While most actors left their memorials to family or studios, Webb personally designed every detail of his final resting place, and it shows. When he died in 1966, Webb was interred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in a custom-built private mausoleum that he sketched himself. Not just the exterior, but the marble interiors, the lighting, and even the scent. Yes, Clifton Webb reportedly specified floral arrangements to maintain a light perfume inside his crypt, believing scent was as essential to ambience as architecture. What's most unusual is the inscription, "Resting with his beloved mother." Webb lived with his mother until her death and never married. They are entombed together in this shrine-like sanctuary. For decades, the mausoleum was known among cemetery staff for its immaculate upkeep, the most precisely maintained in the entire cemetery. Even now, long after the floral budget lapsed, fans sometimes bring roses or lavender to keep the space Webb-worthy. What makes Webb's resting place so bizarre isn't excess, it's intentionality. A man so controlled in life that he designed even the scent of his afterlife. His crypt is less a grave and more a stage, the final act of a lifelong perfectionist.